Human beings do a few basic things. We produce things. We exchange them. We consume them. And when you put billions of people together doing exactly that, you get something we call humanity. But between the individual and humanity, there's another structure sitting right in the middle, the state. And to keep that structure alive, we all pay something. Something you can't opt out of. Something that follows you your entire life. Something you can't really forget, even if you try. Taxes. Today, we're not just talking about how taxes work. We're talking about why they exist, what they're actually used for, and what they quietly do to societies over time. Because taxes aren't just about money. They're about power. They're about behavior. And they're about the relationship between you and the system you live in. Here's something interesting. Most people don't feel like they're paying taxes. Not because they aren't. They absolutely are. But because modern tax systems are designed to be painless. There's a famous quote often attributed to a 19th century French finance minister. He said, "Taxation is the art of plucking the goose to get the most feathers with the least amount of noise." In other words, take as much as possible while making sure people don't scream. That's why income tax feels heavy. You see it on your payslip. You notice it. But consumption taxes, sales tax, VAT, excise taxes, you pay them in tiny pieces. When you buy a coffee, when you buy a snack, when you fill your car with fuel. You don't think, I just paid tax. You just think, I bought something. And that's not a coincidence. That's the system working exactly as intended. Taxes are far older than modern governments. The earliest tax systems appeared in places like ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt. And the reason was simple. These societies depended on things that individuals could never build alone. Irrigation systems, flood control, food storage, roads, security. No single farmer could protect a river system. But a centralized authority could collect small contributions and turn them into something that kept everyone alive. That's how taxation started. Not as oppression, not as punishment, but as coordination, as survival. Of course, once states grew stronger, taxes stopped being just about survival. They became a tool. If you really want to understand political history, don't just look at wars. Look at tax revolts. Because asking people for money is often harder than asking them for loyalty. In 1215, England's Magna Carta limited the king's power to raise taxes without consent. Centuries later, American colonists revolted under a simple slogan, "No taxation without representation." And in 1930, Gandhi walked hundreds of kilometers to protest a tax on something as basic as salt. Different places, different centuries, same message. If we fund the system, we want a say in how it works. Taxes turn subjects into stakeholders. Once people start paying, they start asking questions. And those questions are dangerous for unchecked power. That's why taxes sit at the very center of citizenship. So, why do governments tax people? There are three main reasons. First, to fund public goods. Roads, hospitals, schools, courts, security. Things markets don't always provide well because everyone benefits, even those who don't pay directly. Second, to deal with something economists call externalities. Sometimes the price you pay doesn't include the full cost of your action. Pollution is the classic example. A company makes a product cheaply because the environment absorbs part of the damage. Or think about traffic. When you drive into a crowded city, you're not just moving yourself. You're slowing down thousands of other people. Markets don't price that correctly. So governments step in and adjust behavior using taxes. And it works both ways. Vaccines are subsidized because protecting yourself also protects others. Taxes don't just collect money, they quietly rewrite incentives. Third, taxes are used to steer society. Cigarette taxes, sugar taxes, carbon taxes. Sometimes it's about health. Sometimes it's about climate. Sometimes it's purely political. There was even a time when a ruler taxed beards to force cultural change. When something is taxed, the message is clear. We want less of this. Putting a tax in place is easy. Designing a good one is incredibly difficult, because every tax changes behavior. Set it too low, and it doesn't matter. Set it too high, and people stop producing, stop buying, or start avoiding. That's the intuition behind the Laffer curve. At zero tax, government revenue is zero. At 100% tax, revenue collapses again, because no one works for free. Somewhere in the middle, there's a balance. But that balance depends on trust, enforcement, culture, and institutions. And here's the key part. Not everyone responds the same way. On paper, many tax systems are progressive. In reality, things look different. The real divide isn't income, it's flexibility. Wealthy individuals and corporations can hire experts, use legal structures, find loopholes, move money across borders, delay taxes, optimize everything. That's why even famous billionaires have openly admitted they sometimes pay lower effective rates than their employees. Not because of fraud, but because the system allows it. And then there are tax havens, places built to attract money by offering low taxes and high secrecy. So the paradox is this: the easiest people to tax are often the people least able to avoid it. Workers, consumers, ordinary households, because their taxes can be taken automatically, quietly, at the source, at the checkout counter. Once again, anesthesia. A fair tax system usually tries to do two things. Vertical fairness. Those with more ability should contribute more. Horizontal fairness. People in similar situations should be treated similarly. But fairness isn't just about math, it's about trust. If people believe rules aren't enforced equally, or that some groups always escape, or that taxes are wasted, then compliance collapses. And once trust breaks, the system enters a dangerous loop. Low trust leads to low compliance. Low compliance increases pressure on honest taxpayers. That pressure destroys trust even further. That's how systems decay. Not suddenly, slowly. So what are taxes, really? They're not just government income. They are the price of civilization and the price of power. They fund the systems you rely on, often without noticing them. But they also expose something deeper. They show what a society values, who it protects, and who it burdens. Because the real question isn't, do you pay taxes? The real question is, what do you get in return? If this video resonated with you, let the algorithm know by liking it. And if you enjoy thinking deeper about how things actually work, subscribe and stay around.